Somber, evocative music plays, a blend of strings and a single, haunting flute. Text overlay. The Phantom Plagues. Narrator deep, resonant, and slightly melancholic voice, almost a whisper at times, building to a more commanding tone. A world where the human body, a vessel so fragile, was a canvas for unseen forces, a battleground for afflictions that defy our understanding today. We speak not of the great scourges, the Black Death, the Spanish flu, for their tales are etched deep in history's memory. A silent, terrifying dance. The villagers, at first, whispered of demonic possession, of a curse laid upon her. Hundreds were afflicted, their numbers swelling with each passing day. They danced until their hearts gave out, until their muscles tore, until starvation claimed them. The streets became a macabre carnival of death, a testament to a force no one understood. Priests performed exorcisms, doctors prescribed blood, musicians were even brought in, ironically, to play for them, hoping to tire them out, to satiate the feverish need for movement. Yet the dance continued, a macabre symphony of human suffering, a chilling echo from a time when the very ground beneath your feet could betray you, and your own body could become your worst enemy. What unseen agent had woven this horrifying spell? Was it a poisoned rye, a fungus that warped the mind and body, or something far more insidious, born from the very air they breathed, from the fear that permeated every fiber of their existence? The dancing plague was but one chilling prelude to the strange maladies that haunted history's forgotten corners. It was a stark reminder that in the absence of knowledge, terror finds fertile ground, and the human condition, stripped bare, reveals its most vulnerable, baffling forms. But the whispers turned to shouts, then to horrified gasps, as others began to join Agnes. A man, then a child, then an elder, all seized by the same inexplicable compulsion. Their bodies, once their own, became instruments of an unseen orchestra, compelled to move, to spin, to leap. Day and night, through the scorching sun and the chilling moonlight, they danced. Their faces, once filled with the mundane concerns of peasant life, now twisted into grotesque masks of exhaustion and agony. Foam frothed at their lips, their eyes rolled back into their heads, yet they could not stop. The rhythm, relentless and unforgiving, consumed them. No, we speak of the phantom plagues, the strange, the bizarre, the utterly terrifying maladies that stalked humanity in an age of ignorance and superstition. Diseases that struck with the caprice of a vengeful God, leaving behind not just death, but a chilling legacy of bewilderment. Before the blinding light of modern medicine, before the sterile certainty of laboratories and the cold comfort of diagnostics, there existed a world shrouded in shadow. Imagine, if you will, a small village nestled deep within a forgotten valley, its timbered houses huddled together against the encroaching darkness of the surrounding forests. The year is 1580, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and woods. Life here is a tapestry woven from hardship and simple joys, tethered to the rhythms of the seasons. But beneath this veneer of ordinary existence, a creeping dread has begun to unfurl its tendrils. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, with a solitary figure, a woman named Agnes, known for her quiet demeanor and diligent hands. One crisp summer morning, Agnes stepped into the village square, her movements stiff, unnatural. Her feet began to twitch, then tap, then a rhythmic shuffle. Her neighbors watched, first with amusement, then with dawning concern, as her feet picked up a frantic, unrelenting pace. Soon, her arms joined the macabre ballet, flailing wildly, her body contorting as if possessed by an invisible puppet master. This was no mere madness. This was the dancing plague, or as it was known in Strasbourg dance mania of 1580. 4 weeks, the dancing plague, while undeniably bizarre, was but a single, albeit dramatic, tremor in the vast, uncharted landscape of historical afflictions. Within minutes, a profuse, clammy sweat would erupt, drenching the victims' clothes, soaking their beds. Some believed it was caused by bad air or miasma, rising from swamps or decaying matter. Consider the plight of those afflicted by parochoraticis, though not in its modern, clinical understanding, but in its historical, more terrifying manifestation. Were they becoming something other than human? The psychological toll must have been immense. To watch your own body turn into something alien, something monstrous, to be shunned and feared, was a fate perhaps worse than death itself? While modern dermatology has identified rare genetic disorders that lead to similar conditions, in the past, without such understanding, these individuals were anomalies, living mysteries, tangible representations of humanity's vulnerability to the whims of nature. These diseases, these phantom plagues, were not just physical torments, they were profound existential crises, challenging the very definition of what it meant to be human in a world where unseen forces held sway. Imagine a person, seemingly healthy, whose skin, once smooth and supple, begins to harden, to thicken, to take on the texture and appearance of tree bark, not merely rough, but truly woody, with deep fissures and grotesque scales. This wasn't leprosy, not smallpox. This was a gradual transformation, a living mummification. One such documented case tells of a boy in the 17th century whose skin, from an early age, began to becoming so rigid that he could barely move his limbs. His face, once soft with youthful innocence, was a mask of hardened, reptilian scales, his eyes peering out from within a grotesque shell. Others blamed an imbalance of humors or divine wrath. Treatments ranged from wrapping the patient in layers of blankets to encourage more sweating, a torturous irony, to administering potent emetics to induce Yet, nothing seemed to work. The disease simply appeared raged, and then as suddenly as it had arrived, it would vanish, only to reappear. Years later, a ghostly echo of its former self before finally disappearing completely by the leaving behind only baffled chroniclers and terrifying anecdotes. What unseen microbe? What environmental trigger? What bizarre confluence of factors could have caused such a rapid and deadly affliction, only to vanish without a trace? The sweating sickness stands as a chilling testament to the fragility of life when confronted by the unknown. A spectral assailant that struck without warning, leaving behind only the cold dampness of fear. A terrible thirst consumed them, followed by an unbearable headache and a violent delirium. The very air they breathed seemed to turn to fire in their lungs. The terror of this disease lay in its speed. Many victims were perfectly healthy in the morning, only to be cold and still by nightfall. The phrase, "holly at dinner, dead at supper," became a grim proverb. It wasn't just the rapidity of death that struck fear into hearts. It was the utter helplessness. No boils, no visible lesions, just an internal furnace that consumed the afflicted from within. Entire households were wiped out in a single day, families dissolving into a tragic tableau of sudden, unexplained demise. The rich and powerful were just as susceptible as the poor, perhaps even more so, as their delicate constitutions were thought to be less resilient. Kings and commoners alike trembled before its unseen touch. Consider now a malady far more insidious, one that preyed not just on the body's movements, but on the very essence of human connection, twisting love into revulsion and companionship into isolation. This was the curse of the sweating sickness, or a phantom that emerged from the mists of England in the late 15th century and vanished just as mysteriously. Unlike the dance, which offered a public spectacle of despair, the sweating sickness was an intimate horror, a private torment played out behind closed doors. Its onset was brutally a sudden chill, a feeling of unease, then an excruciating pain in the neck and shoulders. The medical theories of the time were as varied as they were futile. But the body, in its bewildering complexity, held even stranger secrets. This tree-man phenomenon, as it was sometimes crudely called, was often met with a mixture of horror and fascination. Were they victims of a curse? As we delve deeper into the forgotten annals of human suffering, we encounter afflictions that transcended the superficial diseases that seemed to consume the very essence of a person, leaving behind only a hollow shell. One such terrifying malady, often dismissed as mere melancholia or madness by an uncomprehending world, was a precursor to what we might now tentatively identify as a severe form of anorexia nervosa. But in an era where nutritional science was non-existent and psychological understanding rudimentary, one such phenomenon, bordering on the mythological, yet disturbingly real, was the lithopeton, or the stone child. Imagine the shock, the horror, the profound sadness of such a discovery. A life that never was preserved in stone within a living grave. One of the most famous cases, that of Madame Sonneur of Sens, in the 16th century, lived for 28 years with a lithopedion inside her. Only after her death was the calcified fetus discovered. A testament to her body's extraordinary, albeit tragic, resilience. These were not diseases in the conventional sense, but rather a chilling testament to the body's desperate, gruesome attempts to cope with a profound biological failure. They were the ultimate phantom pregnancies, culminating not in new life but in a monument to loss, a stone-cold reminder of the darker corners of human biology, where hope could turn to hardened despair and the miracle of life could twist into a grim preserved relic. Imagine a woman experiencing the joys and anxieties of pregnancy, only for her hopes to be cruelly dashed. The fetus, for reasons unknown, dies within the womb, but instead of being expelled, it remains, and there, within the very sanctuary of life, a macabre transformation begins. Over years, sometimes decades, the mother's body, in a desperate, last-ditch effort to protect itself from infection and decay, calcifies the dead fetus. It encases it in a hard, stone-like shell, essentially mummifying it within her own living flesh. It manifested as a haunting, self-imposed starvation, a slow, deliberate fade from existence. Imagine a young woman, perhaps of noble birth, cloistered away in a dimly lit chamber. She is surrounded by finery, by the comforts of wealth, yet she wastes away before her family's horrified eyes. Their families watched helplessly as their loved ones withered away. A slow, agonizing. Was it a rebellion against societal expectations? a spiritual quest gone tragically awry, or simply a cruel, unfathomable trick of the mind. Without the language of psychology, without the understanding of eating disorders as complex mental illnesses, these cases were anomalies, grim parables of an inexplicable self. They were the living ghosts, haunting their own opulent cages. Their tragic end, an enduring question mark in the face of medical not from a visible fever, not from a bleeding wound, but from an internal refusal, a strange, unwavering conviction that sustenance itself is a poison. Her skin becomes translucent, her bones protrude, her eyes sink deep into their sockets, yet she sees herself as robust, perhaps even plump, and continues to deny herself. This was more than a simple lack of appetite. It was a profound, unyielding delusion. A battle waged within the confines of her own mind against the very instinct for survival. Doctors of the time, baffled and frustrated, would prescribe nourishing broths, force feedings, even attempts at exorcism, believing a demon held her captive. But the demon was unseen, residing within the twisted pathways of her own psyche. The tragic irony was that in a world where hunger was a constant threat for the majority, these individuals, often from privileged backgrounds, were willingly, inexplicably starving themselves. But the body held even darker, more unimaginable secrets. Secrets revealed only through the grim discoveries of the grave, or in rare, horrifying medical anomalies. These stone children were discovered accidentally, sometimes during autopsies on elderly women who had carried them, unbeknownst to themselves or their physicians, for decades. We conclude our journey into the phantom plagues with perhaps the most unsettling of all, for it blurred the lines between life and death, consciousness and oblivion. This was a condition that swept through Europe in waves, particularly after devastating conflicts, a mysterious affliction known simply as the sleeping sickness, not to be confused with the African trypanosomiasis of today, but a historical enigma, a lethargic plague that plunged its victims into an unending slumber. Imagine a world, already ravaged by war and scarcity, where suddenly, people begin to fall asleep. We return to our initial premise, the phantom plagues. These weren't mere medical curiosities. They were profound existential crises, shaping the very fabric of societies. They fueled superstition, inspired fear, and drove the desperate search for answers where none existed. They were the grim reminders that even in the absence of tangible threats, the human body, in its baffling complexity, held the capacity for self-destruction, for inexplicable torment. They highlighted the terrifying vulnerability of life in a world still wrestling with its own biological mysteries. Not a peaceful, restorative sleep, but a profound, unyielding stupor from which they cannot be roused. Pulled from the dusty chronicles of forgotten times, serve as more than just historical anecdotes. They are stark, evocative reminders of the fine line between order and chaos, between health and utter disarray. They tell us that, even today, with all our scientific advancements, there are still corners of the human condition, still mysteries within our own biology, that remain shrouded in shadow. They compel us to ask, what unseen forces might still lurk, waiting to emerge, challenging our understanding, our sanity, our very lives. The past, in its unsettling wisdom, whispers that while some plagues may vanish, the capacity for the strange, the terrifying, the inexplicable, forever remains a part of the human story. And perhaps, just perhaps, some of these phantom plagues, in altered forms, still walk among us, unseen, unheard, waiting for the right moment to reveal their chilling presence once more. For the human story, dark and wondrous, continues to unfold, and its chapters, even the darkest ones, are far from closed. Patience, struck down by a mysterious inflammation of the brain, would develop an uncontrollable desire to sleep, sometimes for weeks, months, or even years. Many awoke from their long slumber only to find themselves tragically parked, their minds trapped in bodies afflicted by Parkinsonian-like symptoms, locked in a silent, immobile prison. Others never awoke at all, their lives ending in a slow, vegetative decline. Was it a virus, a bacteria, a post-viral syndrome, or a cruel twist of fate following the immense psychological trauma of war? The answers remain elusive, a chilling echo of the past when the sleeping plague stalked the land, turning vibrant communities into silent mausoleums of slumbering forms. These were the living dead, a haunting testament to the fragility of consciousness itself. Their bodies lie inert, their eyes half open, unseeing. They might respond faintly to loud noises, or perhaps stir for a moment to take a sip of water, but then they would sink back into the abyssal depths of their slumber. These were not comas brought on by injury or poisoning. These were individuals, once vibrant, active members of society, now reduced to living statues, their minds trapped in an unknown realm. Families watched, helpless, as their loved ones gradually wasted away, their muscles atrophying, their lungs growing weak. The infamous epidemic of encephalitis lethargica that followed World War I in the early 20th century offers a chilling, more recent parallel to these historical accounts. And so, these stories,